Welcome back to Character 101 within Marvel's Contest of Champions. Today we will be focusing on Black Bolt, understanding a little bit of how he works, and postulating on some changes that could happen to his character to make him a little bit more viable, as Black Bolt has been around in this game for quite some time. And if you enjoy this series, make sure that you leave a like on today's video, and don't forget to subscribe for daily variety content. So let's talk a little bit about Black Bolt and what he has to offer. He's actually not a bad character functionality-wise. He just takes a back seat in terms of damage output when compared to a lot of the newer champions that have been coming out recently. So a couple of things that you do want to note about him is his Special 1 attack has a 60% chance to stun for 3 seconds and ignores all armor rating from his opponents, which isn't terrible. His Special 2 attack has an increased percentage chance to stun at 70% and an increased duration at 4 seconds instead of 3. And his Special 3 attack has a 90% chance to stun for a 4-second duration, though it is important to note that the true damage or ignoring the armor that a character possesses is unique only to the Special 1 attack. Every special attack has an 80% chance to inflict an armor break debuff, which will remove an armor buff and reduce the armor rating for 5.5 seconds. And the additional base ability that he has is an enhanced immunity to any poison type effects from any characters in the cast, which is certainly a handy thing to have. His signature ability, Provocation, allows him to further increase his damage output. This allows him to receive cruelty and or fury buffs based off of critical hits that he either deals or receives. If he receives a critical hit, he has a chance to receive one of those buffs permanently, whereas if he deals a critical hit, those furies or cruelties will have a 6.5 second duration for each buff, though this can be circumvented by having Medusa on the team as a team synergy, as that allows those buffs to be permanent rather than temporary. And those are really the biggest things that you need to note about how Black Bolt's items work. His special attacks, we've talked about what they do, but we haven't talked about their specific applications. The Special 1 attack is very, very easy to avoid. It's identical to a couple of other attacks that we've seen, namely Vision. Both versions of Vision have the same animation for the Special 1. And the second ability is the Corkscrew, which allows Black Bolt to connect in a couple of different hits onto his opponents. And in previous versions of the game, he would actually take some recoil damage when he would use his Special 2 attack, which led to a lot of people diverting away from using that special attack because taking recoil is not a great thing to do, especially when you have masteries that already provide recoil after detonating a special attack, so you would just lose 10+% of your health anytime you use a Special 2 attack if that recoil were to pop and provide that adverse effect. Those two attacks, in my opinion, they're very generic, and if I were to see something overhauled, I mean, there's a lot of other abilities that I feel could be incorporated to Black Bolt to make him more viable, and we'll talk a little bit more about those down the road, but one of the biggest things that I would love to see is an overhaul to these two abilities to give him something a little more unique and possibly a little more challenging to avoid or get away from when you come across this character in an event quest or as a defender in an alliance war. The third special ability, the Hypersonic Whisper, I actually think that this is a really awesome looking attack, and it's faithful to the Hypersonic Whisper attacks that Black Bolt is known for. I mean, he does not speak, and he's conditioned himself to not utter any sound when struck because he can just destroy entire cities with so much of a whisper or the minorest utterance. So it's certainly something to behold, though it's also kind of difficult to portray faithfully in any iteration. So what do I really think could benefit Black Bolt if he were to be reworked or have additional items added to him? Well, first off, as with any other characters that we've talked about, it would be kind of cool to see some sort of effect that lingers in between fights, whether that's with a persistent charge type item or the ability for him to carry in a certain percentage of his buffs from a previous fight. And maybe that would be the better way to go about it, is to have a persistence charge meter, but have X percentage of the buffs from the previous fight be carried over, and to have those items stored as the persistent charges instead of some of the other ones that we've seen. Like I mentioned before, it would be really cool to see an overhaul to his animations on his special attacks to make them a little more unique and difficult to get around. I also would really like to see some sort of concussion or disorient buff that can be applied by him, especially after the use of that special 3 attack, because he's using hypersonic attacks. Those are going to give you a massive headache and certainly would affect you more than just causing you to be stunned for a little bit. It would have a very adverse effect to your hearing and would have to be reflected some other way. So maybe something to indicate a loss of hearing, either in the form of a temporary buff, or what I actually think would be really cool would be if you get hit by his special 3 attack, you have a disorient buff that lingers for a couple of fights after the fact. So it's like, you better make sure that you are baiting out these attacks, or you are going to end up in a world of hurt for more than just this confrontation. And that would potentially be a really good item for him to be placed on a defensive node, especially if it's like an all or nothing type node where you've either got to go into that fight with a character that can drain or remove some of his power, or otherwise you're gonna be in a world of hurt for any fights that you're going on for the next couple of rounds in that quest. And we know that that can be done because we see that type of item happening to different degrees, but we see that happening with Mr. Fantastic and some of the attributes that he has if you layer off a couple of the same special attack within the same fight. So just a couple of my thoughts on that front. I also think that it would be good for him to have some sort of build-up meter, or maybe like an aggravation, agitation type rage, similar to what we've seen with the recent overhaul that was done to Yellow Jacket. I'm actually really interested to see what changes he's made, or analyze them more specifically when we get to his edition of this fight. But he just kind of has a passive meter that ticks over to the point where maybe if you provoked him to a certain point, he would just let loose on his mental restraints and unleash a bit more of his sonic attacks, or after he gets to a certain level of aggravation, he will start uttering and deal some recoil or percussive damage to his opponents. I mean, there's just a lot of things that can be done with Black Bolt and how unique he is as a character within Marvel's universe, and I feel like he's rather underutilized here. And a lot of that's due to the fact that he is a very, very old character, and the biggest change or revamp that we've seen to him in recent years has been that removal from his recoil damage off of his second ability activation. So there's a lot of things that could happen. Those are just a couple of thoughts that I personally have as to what can make this character new, fresh, and or better than what he currently is. But what are your thoughts? I'm really interested to hear what you think might work well for Black Bolt in terms of an overhaul. Do you want to see his animations get redone, or do you think that they're fine the way that they currently are? And what other buffs or damage overhauls do you think that he could benefit from? There's a lot of different options, and if you think that it should mirror something that we've seen done recently or be something completely new, I'm very open to your thoughts on this matter. But that's going to do it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed, and we'll be back with the next installment of our character analysis next week. So thanks again for your time, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day.